my opponent Aaron claims that federally funding and legalizing cloning will prove to be beneficial to mankind. But that just isn't the case. He backs up his claim stating that, number one, there would be significant rewards such as curing diseases and the efficiency of transplanting cloned organs. Number two, there are currently federal laws banning the research of cloning. And number three, in order to make scientific advancements, the government must fund cloning research and must lift the ban on cloning. Actually, there are more risks than rewards of funding and legalizing cloning. Aaron claims that there is a benefit of cloning organs and then transplanting them. On the contrary, there are health risks that embryonic stem cells carry. Roman Espejo, who is the author of Biomedical Ethics, states that ESLs, or embryonic stem cells, can give rise to teratomas, which are malignant tumors. The incentive is to heal an ill person, not to make them more ill. Although there is the possibility of providing a patient with a missing organ, we do not want to give them a defective one. In addition, cloning an organ is a complicated process where mistakes can be made. Espejo also states that there are three kinds of ESLs. The first, derived from the inner cell mass. The second, embryonic germ cells. The third kind of ESLs involves somatic cell nuclear transfer. The wrong embryonic stem cell may be used and thus making a defective or incompatible organ. Does the patient want to run the risk of receiving such an organ? Also, there is a massive failure rate in transplanting cloned organs. The Institute of Science and Society states that the success rate of the first transplants to reduce tadpoles was 0.1%. In other words, the failure rate was 99.9%. If the failure rate in tadpoles is high, imagine the failure rate in humans. That is not a risk that should be taken, being that tadpoles are more simple organisms and humans are more complex organisms. Imagine the kinds of consequences that could arise. Aaron then claims that because the federal government is not funding cloning, it is preventing any of these significant rewards from happening. But the fact of the matter is that cloning is not a first priority for the U.S. to be thinking about. In our current situation, there is not enough money, especially with America's economic crisis. According to a website called America's Total Debt Report, we are in debt $53 trillion. There is simply no way of creating a budget for cloning research. We must think about rebuilding America back up economically. Instead of funding cloning research, we should give money to more important matters, such as health insurance. Letters to President.org states that 47 million people in America are uninsured. With so many people without health insurance, we must first focus on our finances towards the present living people, rather than producing more lives that cannot even be insured. Instead of asking for federal government funding, why not just use state funding? Aaron had mentioned that 15 states have laws pertaining to cloning, while 9 others have enacted measures to prohibit reproductive cloning. So why not have the other 26 states funded? Instead of asking the federal government to fund research, they should just use state funding. Aaron then claimed that funding cloning will bring about various scientific advancements. But actually, with the current progress on cloning research, it has shown that there have been many setbacks. Clones themselves suffer from a symptom called large offspring syndrome. The University of Utah says that cloned animals that do survive tend to be much bigger at birth rate than their natural counterparts. Scientists call this large offspring syndrome. Clones with LOS have abnormally large organs. This can lead to breathing, blood flow, and other problems. Cloning may also cause immune deficiency. International Society of Complexity, Information, and Design states that a number of clones are fraught with immune system problems, causing infections and tumors. The massive failing rates of clones also do not seem convincing. Cornell.gov says that 90% of cloning attempts fail to produce viable offspring. This is too high of a rate to be supporting cloning. The risks are too consequential. We must try to avoid such diseases. If we were to make scientific advancements, we must measure the consequences. My opponent mentions the process of therapeutic cloning would be one scientific advancement, but growing embryos to acquire the necessary cell organs would be part of the procedure. This is when it becomes a moral issue. It is morally wrong to develop an embryo just to acquire certain organs. Roman Espejo also states that in his book, it is research on ESLs obtained by nuclear transfer that raises the most serious moral concerns, for it requires the creation of embryos specifically for providing ESLs and embryos being destroyed. You might as well chop off my partner Jennifer's leg and give it to someone. So then says that it is demeaning, however, to produce clones simply to provide spare parts. Such cloning fails to respect the equal and great dignity of all people by making some, in effect, the slaves of others. One alternative to using embryonic stem cells is that you could use adult stem cells instead. Again, Sveva says that mouse bone marrow stem cells can give rise to skeletal muscle and brain cells. Liver pancreas stem cells can give rise to blood cells and brain cells. Brain cells have been found to differentiate to muscle, blood, and intestine, liver, and heart. This way, embryos would not be wasted and no more federal government funds would not be used. With the current failing cloning attempts, America's economic crisis, and the moral nature of cloning, federal funding simply cannot be done.